It was a brisk, chilly afternoon in downtown Graville, a small, quiet city where, oddly enough, it seemed like everyone knew everyone. The city's charm lay in the delicate balance between old and new. Towering modern high-rises shadowed quaint, family-owned businesses that had been here for generations. Granville was the type of place where people waved hello as they passed each other on the street, and everyone had a story. But beneath the surface of this idyllic scene, there was an undercurrent of tension, unspoken, but undeniably present. Dana Carter, a graceful woman in her early 30s, had just stepped out of her favorite local cafe. It was her daily break, where she could relax for a few quiet moments before heading back into the whirlwind of life. Her husband, Ethan Carter, was the city's commissioner, but Dana preferred to keep a low profile. She didn't want people to treat her differently because of her husband's position. To her, the spotlight was unnecessary. She had finished her cup of coffee, and as she made her way toward her car, parked just a few steps away, something caught her eye. Two police officers, Blake and Thomas, pulled up abruptly beside her. They didn't smile. They didn't greet her. Instead, their sharp eyes scanned her from head to toe, the tension between them and Dana so thick it could have been cut with a knife. Dana, still calm and collected, furrowed her brows as she took a step back. "Excuse me, ma'am," Officer Blake said, his voice cold. "We need to ask you a few questions." Dana was taken aback, but she didn't let her surprise show. Her composure was unshaken as she glanced at the officers, confused. "Is something wrong, officers?" she asked, her voice steady but with a hint of unease. Blake didn't answer right away. Instead, he exchanged a brief look with Officer Thomas, who stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area," Thomas said, his tone flat and authoritative. "We need to search you." Dana's confusion deepened. Suspicious activity? She had just left a cafe, a public space where she was known to be. Suspicious activity? "I'm sorry. I just left the cafe." "Is there a specific reason why you want to search me?" she asked, trying to stay polite, though her growing discomfort was becoming harder to mask. Blake crossed his arms and narrowed his eyes. "Are you refusing a search?" he asked, his voice sharper now, demanding an answer. Dana felt her heart rate pick up. She wasn't resisting, but something about this situation didn't sit right. "No, I'm not refusing," she replied slowly. "But do you have any reason to suspect that I've done something wrong?" Without saying another word, Thomas moved closer to her, his eyes cold, and reached for his handcuffs. "Turn around," he ordered. His voice was firm, unwavering. "We need to search you." Dana's mind raced. Search her? But why? What had she done wrong? She hadn't done anything. But there she was, standing in the middle of a quiet street, surrounded by two officers who had decided that her presence was suspicious, simply because she was there. The humiliation started to set in, a deep feeling of injustice that bubbled up inside her. She had done nothing to warrant this. Yet here she was, treated like a criminal. Why? Because of the color of her skin? Because she was a black woman standing in the wrong place at the wrong time? As the cold metal of the cuffs snapped around her wrists, Dana's mind struggled to grasp the absurdity of the situation. Thomas began to search her, aggressively, pulling at her coat, rifling through her handbag, all while Blake hovered nearby. Passers-by hurried by, their eyes avoiding the scene, not wanting to get involved. Dana felt her face flush with a mix of anger and humiliation. The way they treated her, it felt like a public execution of her dignity. As Thomas finished his invasive search, Blake, standing tall and unbothered, raised an eyebrow. "You sure you're not hiding anything, lady?" he asked mockingly, his voice dripping with suspicion. Dana clenched her jaw, but she refused to let them see how much their treatment of her hurt. "I'd like to call my husband," she said, her voice calm, but there was steel beneath the surface. Blake let out a mocking laugh. "Oh, and who's your husband?" "Go ahead, call him," he sneered as if he didn't believe a word she was saying. "Let's see who he is." With her hands now free, Dana pulled out her phone and dialed the number she knew by heart. "You'll find out soon enough," she said quietly, the weight of the moment hanging heavy in the air. The phone rang only twice before a deep, commanding voice answered on the other end. "Dana, what's wrong?" It was Ethan Carter, her husband, the city's police commissioner. She could hear the concern in his voice. "They're searching me, Ethan." "Officers Blake and Thomas," Dana explained, glancing at the officers who, though their smirks had faded slightly, still wore the confidence of men who believed they were untouchable. There was a pause on the line, and then Ethan's voice returned, steady and firm. "Where are you?" "Olive and Maple. I just left the cafe. I haven't done anything wrong, but they're treating me like a criminal." Dana's voice quivered slightly, but she held herself together. She wasn't about to let them break her. "I'll be there in 5 minutes," Ethan replied, and Dana could hear the determination in his tone. She lowered the phone, eyes meeting the officers, and wondered, would this moment of humiliation mark the end of something? Or would it be the beginning of something bigger? Something that would force the city and its people to face the deep-seated prejudices that still lived in the shadows? Ethan's voice was firm as he spoke, the tone of authority unmistakable before he ended the call. Dana felt an unexpected surge of strength rushes through her, knowing that her husband, the commissioner of the city, was on his way. She had always believed in his ability to handle situations like these. But still, the sting of being wrongly accused, of being treated with such blatant disrespect, it sat heavily in her chest, fresh and raw. Officer Blake, who had been pacing restlessly, glanced up as the black SUV approached at an alarming speed. The car screeched to a halt, and the door swung open with a dramatic force. Out stepped Ethan Carter, tall, imposing, dressed in his commissioner's uniform, the gold badge glinting under the fading sunlight. His eyes blazed with fury as he strode towards the scene with purpose, and in that instant, the officers froze. They recognized him immediately. "Commissioner Carter," Blake stammered, his words faltering as he took an uncertain step forward as if trying to explain himself. But Ethan's cold gaze silenced him before he could say another word. "Step aside," Ethan commanded, his voice like steel. The officers had no choice but to obey, retreating with quick, unsure steps. Dana stood tall, a sense of calm settling over her as Ethan's gaze softened when he reached her side. His expression was full of concern, his anger momentarily replaced with care. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice quiet, gentle, almost too gentle for a moment like this. Dana nodded, though the humiliation still burned deep within her chest. "I'm fine." But as her eyes flicked over to the officers, standing rigid now and avoiding her gaze. She couldn't shake the feeling of being wronged. Ethan's face hardened again, his protective instincts kicking in. He turned his focus entirely on the two officers. "You two," he began, his voice cold. "Explain yourselves?" Blake, shifting uncomfortably, glanced at Thomas, who remained silent. We had reports of suspicious activity in the area, sir." She matched the description, Blake stammered, his voice lacking confidence. Ethan's eyes narrowed, disbelief creeping into his voice. "Matched the description of what?" he asked, his words sharp. "Did she resist? Did she threaten you in any way?" "No, sir," Thomas muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. The street, once filled with the sounds of everyday life, now felt eerily quiet. People had stopped to watch, their eyes drawn to the tension unfolding before them. Ethan took a step closer, his voice growing colder, more pointed. "Then why did you feel the need to harass her? Was it because she's black? Was that your only suspicion?" Blake, now visibly shaken, swallowed hard and tried to backpedal. "Sir, we were just following protocol." But the words felt hollow, inadequate. Ethan's gaze grew even more intense, his voice rising slightly. "Your protocol is broken," he stated, his tone filled with authority. "And you're about to face the consequences." The air was thick with tension as the officers stood frozen, their shame evident, but still unable to backtrack. Ethan didn't break his gaze as he pulled out his phone and dialed internal affairs. His voice was calm, but there was an undeniable finality to it. "I want Officers Blake and Thomas under immediate investigation," he said clearly. "They're to be suspended from duty until further notice." Blake's face turned a ghastly shade of white. "Sir, we didn't mean to," he began, his voice faltering. Ethan cut him off with a sharp look. "You didn't mean to what?" he challenged. "Didn't mean to harass my wife? Didn't mean to treat her like she was less than human? Or didn't mean to get caught?" The silence that followed was deafening. Thomas, who had been silent up until now, stepped forward, his voice shaking with uncertainty. "It was a mistake, sir. We were just doing our job." "A mistake?" Ethan's voice was icy, his words deliberate. "A mistake that could have escalated into something far worse. And do you think that's an excuse?" By now, the street was filled with onlookers, some whispering amongst themselves, others watching in hushed silence as the consequences of the officers' actions unfolded before them. Internal Affairs officers arrived shortly after, swiftly pulling Blake and Thomas aside for questioning. The smug confidence that had once filled their stance was gone, replaced by the unmistakable signs of fear and regret. Dana stood beside Ethan, her gaze fixed on the officers as they were led away. A sense of relief washed over her, but beneath it lingered a sadness that would not easily fade. She hadn't been judged for her actions. She had been judged simply for the color of her skin. And though justice was being served, the pain of this experience would stay with her for a long time. Ethan turned to Dana, his expression softening. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," he said quietly, his voice filled with genuine remorse. "It won't happen again." Dana offered him a small, grateful smile. "Thank you for coming. I didn't know what else to do." "You did the right thing," Ethan replied, placing a protective arm around her shoulders. "And now, those officers will face the consequences." As they walked away from the scene, the people of Granville couldn't help but whisper about what had just unfolded. It was a day they would not soon forget, a day when the wife of the commissioner had been wrongly harassed, but in the end, justice had been served swiftly and publicly. The reckoning had come, and it was a lesson for all to learn. No one, not even the police, was above the law. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, don't hesitate to like the video and share it with your friends. And remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell for more fascinating stories.
Have a nice day.